Welcome to the Life on Purpose podcast with Holan and Cassy. And today we're going to talk about how we left Hawaii to move to Las Vegas.
Yeah, that was a journey. It was a lot emotionally, physically, mentally. Yeah.
So the first question, I have some notes over here. So question is like, and we get this all the time, is like, why would you leave Hawaii?
Yeah.
And a lot of people that ask that usually is they just want some context because they don't know what it's like to live in Hawaii. So we're just going to share some context. Starting off with the first place we moved to after we got married in 2014. We moved together into a small place. You know how it is when you're newlyweds. And we found a place for $1,300. It was in the Moanalua area of Honolulu. And it was like less than 500 square feet.
Yeah, it was so tiny. But you make it work. It's like one of those where your kitchen, your dining room, your living room, it's like all just kind of one together. It's like your refrigerator is bleeding into your living room. Tiny bedroom.
Yeah, it was like a one bedroom. I feel like some people, I don't know if it would have been better to be a studio because that one bedroom was basically like our bed kind of like fit the whole thing.
It was like almost wall to wall, just bed.
And this wasn't an apartment. It was an extension of somebody's house. So this is common in Hawaii where people would just make extensions out of their homes. And some of these extensions are not legal. I think the one that we lived in was definitely not a legal extension. We had like electric wires and all this kind of stuff. But we lived like that for a couple of years. And what happened is we ended up spending more time at my dad's place because my dad was traveling to Asia. So you have an empty home, and it was a lot nicer than what we were living at. So we just kind of hung out over there because nobody was using it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's so many memories.
So after that, after a couple of years, we're like, hey, why are we spending money on this when we could just stay at my dad's place? So we kind of just moved ourselves into that situation. And after like a few months, my dad was asking like, hey, when are you guys going to find a new place? And I was like, well, he's not really using it, but that kind of pushed us and made us kind of look. Yeah. And so the next place we moved into was a house. Basically, we wanted to say like, so our budget at the time was like maybe $1,700. Yeah. And we closed our office. We had an office where we did meetings, and we wanted to continue doing meetings. So our dream was to have like home meetings in our home. So an apartment may not cut it because maybe the parking situation or not a lot of space to do a meeting. Yeah. $1,700 in Hawaii back in 2016 wasn't going to get you a house. So we would have to get roommates. And so we had a friend. She had a 5-bedroom house. It had 6 rooms. One of them technically wasn't a bedroom. It was a den, I guess, or a bonus room. So 5 bedrooms, bonus room. And she just needed help to cover her mortgage. It would have been $3,400 for mortgage and home expenses for that house. We weren't going to pay $3,400, but we said, hey, we'll take half the house. So we'll take 3 out of those 6 rooms, and we'll have to get roommates. But if they could figure out the roommate situation. So we had 3 roommates.
3 roommates, 2 bathrooms. Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, we did a couple of home meetings over there, we were still traveling at the time, and it was an adjustment. Yeah. And so we kind of decided after our lease was up that, hey, are we going to renew our lease? Or are we going to move somewhere else, or what do we do? And it was then where we were just like, hey, maybe we need to just start fresh and just move to, Las Vegas. If we were traveling anyway, so we weren't really utilizing the house as much as possible. We didn't want a roommate situation. And then we're looking at cash flow, not only for our house expense, but also our travel expense. Because if you live in, let's say, Las Vegas, you're able to travel to other cities in the United States for a lot less than if you lived in Hawaii.
Right. And I think we only lived in that situation for a year, right? And by the end of that year, it was kind of like, yeah, we need to do something different.
So we packed up our stuff, we put it in storage. We moved in with Cassie's parents for a couple of months. And within a couple of months, we were like, hey, we'll move to...
We're ready to go.
We're ready to go to Las Vegas. Now, mind you, we had a list of places that was in our head. Like and we've traveled all over the U.S. to a lot of the major cities. And which city would we move to, right? There's the ideal city, but there's also budget and all these things to factor. Yeah. So let's talk about some of those choices and how we came to Las Vegas.
Well, we were looking for something with no state income tax.
Yes.
Right? So then that pretty much narrowed down our choices.
Yeah, let's go over those 7 states. So no state income tax for those of you who may know or not know. So you have Washington, you have Nevada, you have Texas, you have Tennessee, you have Alaska, and then you have Wyoming and South Dakota. And so, we're not going to move to Wyoming or South Dakota. We're looking for major cities. And so that leaves some choices. So 7 states, really, we're looking at 4 states mostly.
Yeah. And some of those factors were also, we didn't want to move too far away, wanted to be in an area where we had friends or family, at least some people that we know, right, that we could be close to. And the factor of, going home, going back to Oahu and, that back and forth, travel.
Yeah.
Making it easy.
So when we take those 2 factors, so no state income tax and a place where we know people, or there's a lot of like Hawaii people that live in, you're looking at maybe like Seattle, Washington, Vancouver, Washington, which is right across the street from Portland. You're looking at Las Vegas. There's Houston. So Houston may not have a lot of Hawaii people, but Cassie's family lives there. She has an aunt that lives there. Her grandmother's originally from Houston.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been like the ideal because then we're surrounded with so much more family. But travel-wise, it would have been a lot harder, I think, for us.
And so also factoring cost of living. When you look at a place like Seattle, it's very similar to Hawaii. There might be some areas that cost less, right? But it's not as a significant drop of cost of living as it is with Las Vegas or Houston. So those would probably our top 2 choices. And when we spread out our net to places that may have state income tax, but still have a lower cost of living or kind of the feel that we're going for, we add in Phoenix and Portland, right? This was on our radar. So those are the 4 cities, right? California, it's like Hawaii. It has higher tax, high cost of living relatively to the national average. I just learned this right now because I was looking. A lot of people say, well, the homes in California are just as much as Hawaii, if not more. And we're looking at different places, right? Los Angeles, San Diego, right? But when you look at it, they are higher. The median price is higher, but the homes are bigger. So actually, when you look at by square foot, the homes in Hawaii per square foot are a little bit higher. And it just depends, neighborhood, everything factors, except for San Francisco Bay Area. That San Francisco is definitely higher than Honolulu. So, so those are the places we prayed about it. we had some peace, and we decided on Las Vegas.
Yeah, which was it wasn't like the last place I wanted to move to, but it was just, growing up and things happen. We've taken family trips to Vegas, and things happened on those trips that were kind of like, no, we don't want to, some of the stigma that comes up is it's not safe. Like we only see like the view that we have as like tourists, right, is the Strip or downtown. Like, and so if that's all you see, that's all you're going to know. Unless you go outside, like to the suburbs, and to surrounding areas, then you can get a better idea of, oh, this is actually like normal.
Yeah. Just because a person lives in Las Vegas doesn't mean they gamble. In fact, we know a lot of people, ourselves included, that don't gamble in Las Vegas. In fact, I think being next to the casinos kind of makes you look at it like, yeah, I don't want that. Yeah. You see that the house always wins, so you kind of stay away from that. And so we did have a few friends. I had a couple of high school friends that classmates that live here, and a middle school friend. And we had a small team, doTERRA team over here as well, about around 80 people. We had a more bigger team in Los Angeles and Southern California. So this was the idea at the time, is we were going to drive down to California, talking about starting fresh and new opportunities. It was we could expand, right? We can grow our team in California like we did in Hawaii, right? In Hawaii at the time, I think we had about 2,000 people. So if we can do that, it's like you're duplicating, right? You're expanding.
Right. Yeah. There was a bribe involved.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things Cassy and I, we love Disney, right? And even before moving to Las Vegas, we'd go to Disneyland or one of the Disney parks at least once a year.
Once or twice a
year. And I said, hey, we will be like 3 to 4 hours away. And it wasn't financially worth it to get an annual pass before, going once or twice a year. But since we can just drive for 4 hours, why not, get an annual pass? If you move up here, we'll get an annual pass.
Yeah, because I was so sad. Like leaving family, leaving friends, like the community that you build up. See, I'm getting a little emotional about it. I didn't grow up, I never left the island, like to, move away for a long period of time. I went on vacations, for a week, 10 days, whatever, but I never went to college outside of the state. I was never outside for the summer. So, that was really hard for me. And I know like you left to go to college, so you had a little bit more experience. You're more of a free spirit, I think, too. Like you can adapt and move and, just be on your own. It's a little bit easier for you than it was for me. And I think like I'm okay now. It's still hard, but it's okay. We have family in the form of, church, and we do go back, once or twice a year. So it's not terrible.
Yeah. How'd you like the annual pass going to Disneyland?
So it was nice. I mean, because then you could take a day trip, or, it was like, we don't even have to go on rides, or it was just nice. I mean, okay, like anybody who's had an annual pass or has an annual pass, like, the convenience of it. One time we just went in to get churros and we spent time with friends.
Yeah, it's not like when we go on a trip where you're like, man, I don't know the next time we're going to Disneyland. Like
you have to maximize it.
Yeah, you have to go to every single ride. And now it's like, man, you can just go to Disney without the stress. If you don't get to go on a ride, so be it. We're not going to wait 2 hours on a ride. We can do that next time. And so we talked about how when we lived in Hawaii, we were paying $1,700 for half a house. Mind you, that house was around 2,100 square foot, $3,400 total was the rent for everyone. Moving to Las Vegas, we looked for homes, and it was so exciting because it's like, wow, there's a lot of homes, and we can move. We weren't familiar, and we found a place. It was 1,700 square feet, and it was $1,300 at the time. This was in 2017, and it was in the southwest region called Mountains Edge.
Yeah, we kind of came out here on a whim. We didn't come out here, scope out homes and different areas, and then decide to move here. Yeah. It was, nope, we're 2 feet in. We stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks and went up to Utah. We rented a car. Yeah. Went up to Utah for convention and then came back and moved in, to a place.
We have a friend that's a realtor. She lived in Las Vegas for past 20 plus years. And I like her. She's a straight shooter, and she's not the person that tells you like, this is the best area. Like she's like, there's a lot of good areas. It just depends what you want. And we chose Mountains Edge because we had a close friend that lived over there, and you kind of feel safe. Like, at least one person over there. And our logic at the time was like, we knew some people that lived in Henderson. So if you go east, you go to Henderson, you go north, you go to Summerlin and Centennial. And so for those of you not familiar with Las Vegas geography, it's a valley. It's basically a big square, basically, surrounded by mountains. And you can divide Las Vegas into 4 sections. The southwest region, which is probably developed in the last 20 years. The southeast region, which is Henderson. And the west region, which is Summerlin. Northwest is Centennial, and you have North Las Vegas in those quadrants. And it's funny because when we first moved to Las Vegas, everybody's like, just like us. Well, all we know is like, oh, I heard Summerlin's nice, or I heard Henderson is nice. And then it takes a while to really get to know the neighborhoods. Yeah. They all have a different vibe. And so, you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's kind of like, living in the islands. It's every, I guess, area you go to, it's like it's changing. Like you feel the vibes change, the people change, how we interact. It's a little bit different. And so that's kind of what it is here, but like on a larger, like scale, larger landmass.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that in Hawaii, because we grew up in different neighborhoods. Some of you are familiar with Hawaii, some of you are not. We grew up on Oahu, and we consider ourselves townies, I guess. Town is Honolulu, but Honolulu has a lot of different parts. Yeah. I grew up moving out a lot. I actually grew up in Waikiki, which most people don't grow up in Waikiki. Waikiki is where the tourists go to. The equivalent in Las Vegas would be the Strip. But I grew up over there. I have a lot of families that grew up in Kalihi. And for most of my adult life, it was mostly in Salt Lake, Moanalua area. So that's near the airport where the stadium used to be. And that's where I grew up. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Aiea, so close by Pearl Ridge. And then later moved to Salt Lake. So it's kind of funny because we're like walking distance.
But we didn't know each other.
We didn't know each other, yeah.
Yeah. And that's basically, I have lived in Aiea as well, Pearl City. And, you heard how we lived in Mililani. So we know most of the island. I've also lived in Waipahu. But all the neighborhoods are different on Oahu, just like all the neighborhoods are different in Las Vegas. And so I guess the adjustments in Las Vegas, what surprised you the most, and what were the biggest adjustments, or what are some of the, I wouldn't say big adjustments, but the transition, what made the transition easy?
Easy, I guess the ability to go back and forth between home and here. I guess that was the biggest thing that helped, was not, being held to, just once, twice, or a long period of time where we didn't have the luxury to, to fly. So that was really helpful. And I mean, the way we moved also, I guess, contributed to that, because we didn't move with like a big container or anything like that.
Yeah.
We basically moved with boxes and suitcases.
Yes.
So every like month or couple months, like when we would go back and forth, it was each time bringing a little bit more with us.
Okay, so let's talk about that for people that are moving. So we, Hawaii, between Hawaii and the other states, there's an ocean. And so you can't just get a U-Haul and put everything in there and move it.
Yep.
So you either have to ship things on container, sell everything or get rid of everything and buy from scratch, or a lot of people don't do what we did because we didn't ship on container, is we move things in suitcases. And so obviously the big furniture we gave away. Some of the things we let go. The Marie Kondo really helped with that, the art of tidying and cleaning, to help us let go, and moving using the luggage.
Well, and the reason we did that was it was cheaper for us to, like, the flight was cheaper than getting a container. We had status, like we were like platinum status with Delta, so we could move 3 75-pound, 70-pound luggages each.
Yes.
So that was a total of 6.
Yes.
Right, with the both of us. So that
For
helped.
free. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is cheaper than shipping. The really heavy stuff like books and media mail, we could ship.
Yeah, just USPS.
USPS, and we have a lot of tips on that. I think another easy thing that helped with the transition is food. I think food and people.
Yeah. Well, and like we said, like we didn't know a whole lot of people, but the people that we did know, just that handful really helped with that transition.
Yeah. Shout out to our friend Jason.
And Michelle.
And Michelle. We definitely, food, comfort food is basically what reminds you of home. And growing up in Hawaii, we have local food. So plate lunches, right? So you have chicken katsu, kalbi, what else?
Garlic chicken.
Hawaiian food, right?
Yeah.
Lau lau.
Kalua pig.
Yeah. And a lot of Asian food. So got your ramen, you got your pho. Sushi. Definitely. Sushi is a must. And so when you look at cities.
Anything with rice.
Yeah. When you look at cities in the U.S., you can kind of see how we can narrow it down. It's just process of elimination. And it's like, is it a must-have? And for us, it really helps. So think about that. Sometimes we have some friends looking at places and it's like, the restaurants and the grocery stores go hand in hand. If there's an Asian restaurant or a sushi restaurant, that they'll have their ingredients, right? And Las Vegas is so neat. We're in the middle of the desert, right? But the casinos cater to a crowd that have those tastes. They want good sushi. They want good Asian food. And so we benefit from that. And so we didn't lose that. And the restaurants are open late. They have a lot of all you can eat. It costs, at the time, it cost less. It still costs less now as the prices went up. But it's a great place. I always say I love Vegas because you can drive to a restaurant and you don't have to wait in long lines. I know there are a lot of great restaurants in some cities, but then sometimes it's packed. In Vegas, it's like...
Well, there's so much option here that it's like you have more than 2 ramen places, right? Like there's like a whole lot more and you have options. And so...
Too many options.
Yeah, sometimes too many.
Because once you find your favorite place, you don't really explore because you're like, I found a place. And so how we discover is either we have to intentionally go look for new places or we just ask friends like, hey, what's your favorite place?
Yeah.
And so, well, what's one thing that we were really shocked or surprised was the local food is pretty good over here. It is on par, if not, dare I say, some of the restaurants are better than on Oahu.
Some of them, yeah. And I think like each, depending on where the chef came from too, because different islands have their different styles, and I would argue that there are some places on different islands that are better, than what we grew up with.
Well, that makes sense because a couple of the restaurants over here, their chef is from the Big Island, right? And when I go to the Big Island, I love their comfort food over there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Las Vegas is the 9th island. There's a lot of Hawaii people here. Catering to that local community is pretty important. To be on par, to have that home cooking, that taste, right, that we all know and that we're familiar with, to help with that, homesickness.
Yeah, I mean, poke. You can find poke in Hawaii. There's a place, Poke Express, where they fly it, to Las Vegas, and it's really good. Yeah. There's other places that aren't local, but they fly the. They have fresh ahi, and it's good. Yeah. It's good. And so, what else is there about Las Vegas?
Well, it doesn't snow. Well, not, to blanket the ground in the mountains, it snows. But that's like another thing that like, I don't think I could, like, it gets cold, and I freeze every single winter, but to not have snow is just another benefit.
Yeah. When we looked at different cities and different states, we didn't realize, but it's like, would we live in somewhere where we had snow, where we have to change our driving habits, or, clean the driveway, right? And it was like, it's convenient not to have snow, not to be that cold. It does get cold here, but not in the freezing, snowy temperatures.
And we're not against snow. It's just what we prefer.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes I like being in the snow, but to have it all the time, and I don't think we'd survive, honestly. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about what we do differently and what we tell somebody considering a major move and how to embrace change. What are the lessons that we learned? So everybody learns something a little bit different from moving. You guys probably have some advice, right? We talked a little bit about how we save some money by moving in the suitcases, which, by the way, buying the furniture in Las Vegas compared to Hawaii, it was crazy. I mean, how much did we spend to furnish our whole house?
I don't remember, but it was like ridiculously cheap considering it was the bedroom, the living room. Actually, it was like 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a loft.
Yeah.
Like all together.
Dining table, beds.
Dining table.
I think it was less than $2,000. I was thinking, man, this costs less than the bed or a couch back in Hawaii. And but one of the things that I haven't considered, but now I would consider any place I would move, is to check out the city in terms of the neighborhoods where there's a church. And one of the things that surprised me in Las Vegas is they actually have a lot of churches. They have like 4 or more Christian radio stations. That's when I started being like, you wouldn't think that, right? Yeah. This is Sin City, right? And has casinos and everything. But, you have to keep in mind that, we were all looking for something. Yeah. And so look for a church, because their proximity does matter.
Yeah. And like looking for church, but also like something that you feel led to be like, that you feel led to be a part of too. And like seeing, will I fit in here, to have that community, not, saying that you have to fit in, but I don't know. For me, it's a hard thing because, one, I already feel like I don't fit in, like anywhere I go to, right? until I make friends and find the people who I can really trust and be around. And my circle is very small. So I guess, yeah, like seeing what type of people, how the church interacts. I mean, that's also, that's like something important to me. Mm-hmm. Like, are they welcoming enough that I will feel accepted and be able to grow with the people in that church, in that area?
Yeah, and something that, I always believe that, God will always guide us in that sense. It's interesting. I've run into people at some of the churches, and they drive like 30 to 40 minutes to go to church, mm-hmm. because that's the place that they feel led to. And it's far from their home. And that goes to show a lot of times you just choose the home first, and you think about the church is the afterthought, but you don't realize that, hey, this is your community that you're going to be part of. Mm-hmm. You're going to be communing there at least once a week, but sometimes multiple times. And a lot of the people that go to that church are within that proximity.
Well, I also think of like schools too. Like, mm-hmm. people base their location sometimes, or their move, on the school, mm-hmm. that they want their children to be a part of. So it's almost like the same thing, but with the church.
Yeah. I would also try to experience it for yourself. So when we first moved to Las Vegas, we moved to Mountain's Edge, right? And because we thought, these are all the factors and everything. But as we lived there, we got to know the neighborhoods a lot better. And we actually moved where, Cassy told me, if there's anywhere in Las Vegas that I'd move to, I'd go to my friend's neighborhood where she was going to Bible study with. And we end up moving over there. Mm-hmm. And so it's definitely is, you don't know until you're there. Just don't base your preferences based on other people's preferences on the neighborhood.
Yeah. And definitely we were in prayer, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that was very foundational for us, because we didn't know. Like, we also struggled going back and forth, where we kind of knew that this is going to be it. We wanted to live here, or, we needed to be here for whatever purpose God had for us. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there is always that we can always move back. Mm-hmm. We can always go back home. If this doesn't work out, we can go home. And so that was always, like, I guess, the scapegoat, like the open door, right, that we had.
Except in 2020, when the world shut down, we also had the conversation, are we going to move back, or are we going to stay? Mm-hmm. And we went all in, because it was like, you know what? I think now is a time to go start looking to just grow our roots. Right. We've always rented at that point. Mm-hmm. You're limited to do with what you can do with the house, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to do too much for the house, because, it's not your house. Yeah. And we actually looked for homes that would be our home. Mm-hmm. And so we moved to the Southern Highlands area. Yeah. And, at the time, at 2020, it was like interest rates are low, the prices, it was funny. We can look back, like hindsight is 2020, but a lot of people, mm-hmm. they thought we were crazy. Yeah. They said the world's shutting down. Why the prices have been going up. Mm-hmm. They thought it was going to crash and go down. So why would you buy at the peak, which they thought was the peak, but it wasn't. Fortunately, it was good, because the last day we actually went to do the open houses, mm-hmm. After that they closed it. Yeah. There was no open houses. It was crazy at the time. And
we were the only people that got to see the house we're in person. Yep. Right.
And there was only one other competition. Mm-hmm. We were able to get the house. Yeah. And it was a good deal. So mm-hmm. for reference, $525,000, mm-hmm. 2,800 square foot, 4 bedrooms. Yeah. Right. And then today it's around 700,000. A lot more affordable than Hawaii. When we look at this home, we look at it as our our business, right?
Yeah.
And Hawaii, it's hard, right? To maximize. You either have to have a separate office, right? Or you spend a lot on a home.
Yeah.
Over here, I look at it like the expense is like it goes into like we can use this space, right, for podcasting. We dedicate a room for an office, and it just has that level of comfort.
Right.
And keep in mind, I was so grateful that during the lockdowns that we had a lot of space. We didn't feel cramped.
Yeah. And we have friends and like-minded people in the neighborhood that, we could commune with and and just share in that experience with, having friends who that's your neighbor, it's always a good time.
Yes. The neighbors make a huge difference. And I've heard a lot from Las Vegas, and we experienced this too, where, the neighbors aren't that friendly, right? Like everybody just kind of keeps to themselves and don't talk, but you can't make that generalization. Every neighborhood's different. And I would say in our neighborhood, we know at least 4 of our neighbors.
We know at least half of our street, maybe a little less, but like by 1 or 2 families. But
and we've been to their homes. Some of them been to our home. It makes a big difference. So having that community, your neighborhood community and church community, if it weren't for that, I would feel lonely and want to go back home.
Right.
But really having that is like, it just gives you that level of comfort. And
you have to be intentional about it too. Because if you yourself are not intentional to reach out to your neighbors or to introduce yourself or seek out other, like common interest things that, have a community attached to it, then it's a little bit harder. You will feel sad. You will feel lonely, disconnected, out of place. And even for me as an introvert who likes to be at home, who'd prefer to be at home, I still desire that community and connection too. So, making that effort to just say, hey, like, do you want to hang out? Or let's go sit on our driveways, and just talk story, going to church, finding group, it's very intentional in that way. And it is hard sometimes to enter an already established area, but, like you just have to go for it because you never know where God's opening the door for you.
Yeah. I guess the last lesson is it takes a while to build community. And I didn't realize that. We thought like, hey, we're going to go to Las Vegas. We didn't, we were traveling first 3 years, 2 years, we were locked down.
Yeah.
And then, only in the last 2 years did we really have our roots in Las Vegas. And then maybe think about like, we're rebuilding our network from scratch. I took that for granted when you're in Hawaii, because when you're in Hawaii, you grew up over there. People find connections like, hey, what neighborhood do you live in? What school did you go to? Hey, what's your last name? Are you related to so-and-so? Yeah. It's so easy to build a rapport and make the connections, where over here, nobody knows you. You have no reputation. There's a few common ground, and you are starting from scratch. And that rebuilding your network doesn't happen overnight. And so, that was something that I learned. So that is our episode from our move from Hawaii to Las Vegas. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.